Okay, as I start this section, I want to give a hello to my people, my students in History 102 at 11 and 10 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday. Nathalie, Karina, Libby, Brianna, Isabel, Andrea, Delaney, Grace, William, Seth, Caleb, Alexander, Logan, Lillian, Hannah, Miguel, Eric, Erica, Joseph, Stephen, Colton, Nicholas, Joshua, Priscilla, Caden, Brooke, Angelica, Lamar, Brenda, Wyatt, Dante, Andrew, Joseph, Manuel, Stephen, Austin, William, Jessica, Anna, and Tierra, Alexandra, and June. And June, I hope everything's going great with you too. Anyway, if you ever want to send me like an email that just with a picture or some little thing that tells me how you're doing and what's up with you, that'd be kind of cool. So you guys see me whenever you're watching me, and those that are watching it, of course. But I'd sure like to know exactly what's going on with you. So, of all of the forces at work that were transforming America, making it modern America, one of the more important was what I'm going to just generally call a vehicle of change. I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about here, and that's the automobile. Now, just a quick history of the automobile. The history of the automobile, of course, is relative to some degree, at least in terms of point of origin, depending where you are. So in the United States of America, we basically say it started in 1896. I remember in 1996 they were celebrating the centennial of the automobile. I think in Germany they'd go back a little farther, like 1890, when Daimler or Benz, whoever was doing their little thing. But in 1896, Henry Ford put together this interesting little horseless carriage, of course, you know, and that is perceived then as the beginning of the automobile ages in terms of America. By 1900, there were about 8,000 cars in America, so that means relatively uncommon, very expensive, idiosyncratic vehicles, but you would begin to see them. There's a really cool tape of San Francisco, Main Street in San Francisco in 1906, and you begin to see the automobiles are appearing, kind of crossing the street and doing things. The real development, the first developmental period of the automobile is the progressive era, so that we see by 1920 there are now 8 million cars in America, and by 1930 28 million cars in America. 28 million cars. That's probably about as many cars I feel like I drive by when I think the state of California has over 35 million cars, and the nation has something like 150. I can't remember, I read it one time, but massive numbers. But still, it kind of indicates to us that by the time we get to the 1920s, the automobile is beginning to be the automobile age. It's beginning to take over, of course, and have a tremendous impact upon America. Now, the automobile will become this dynamic force of modernization. It becomes a vehicle of change in no uncertain terms. But in the story, it's the story of the first great car. And this is the first great car, really, not just of the United States of America, but it is so dominant. It is the world's first great car. And this car, of course, will come along and really be transformative in just about everything in American life. And the first great car in the history of the world was, I'll give you a chance to guess, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it was the Model T. The Model T is, of course, this extraordinary vehicle that will come in and transform America in its own way, transforming the entire world. The Model T, of course, will be a potential identification in association with our final examination. Now, the Model T, I have a problem with the Model T in that I'm kind of in love with it, and I have to tell you, I'm really disappointed right now because I have my own little Model T, which I take to class whenever I present this, but it's in my office in Palomar, of course. Can't get to my office in Palomar, so I'm sort of sad about that. Super easy for you guys to just do a little quick search on the Model T to see exactly what it is that I'm talking about. I think it's really interesting that the Model T, there were just so many of them that it's like an entry-level car collector car. You can actually get them for a pretty decent price. We're talking maybe the low 10,000s and stuff like that, where you can get yourself a functioning Model T. But I'm very much intrigued by the Model T. Every time I see one, I get excited. I go over and take a look at it. There was this one time where there was one in a parking lot in LA that just sort of looked like it had been left there, had a flat tire. And I couldn't help myself, but I wanted to sit in the damn thing. So I got, of course, there's no way to lock the door, so I just kind of jumped in, really tight, in confining little location, but still. And wouldn't I love to get to drive a Model T? I also got to sit in one at the Henry Ford. The Henry Ford is a big museum the Ford family Ford company created up there in, I think, near Dearborn, Michigan. And it was so cool that they have an actual Model T, nice big one that you get to sit in, kind of, and just so you can get and I had got in the Model T, had my picture taken, had a lot of fun with that. Okay, but the Model T is something that I'm a little bit obsessed about, and so this will kind of color the way that I present it. And realize that, I'll tell you much more than you actually need to know for the identification. But here's where it begins. So the Model T is not one story, it's three stories. So that means there's three things that are going on here. And the first is the story simply of a human being. The person behind the Model T, and the person behind the Model T is, I'll give you a chance, 1, 2, 3, yeah, you did guess that, Henry Ford. Henry Ford, of course, this famous figure that is the creator, the inventor of the Model T. Henry Ford, interesting individual, clearly a man of genius, there's no doubt about that, but clearly a man of significant problematic issues. I might want to call it madness, okay? And I don't know why, but I'm always intrigued by people who demonstrate sort of both sides, who are successful, but who are also kind of problematic. And, I don't know, I guess it's because I'm flawed, I feel very flawed, and I kind of want to find the flaws in other people. And Henry Ford is very much a flawed person. Now, Henry Ford was born on a farm outside of Michigan, near Dearborn, Michigan. And his father absolutely assumed that his son would become a farmer. And when Henry Ford got married, his father gave him as a gift, I think, a 120-acre farm. It was out there in the Dearborn area. Well, Henry Ford, had very different designs in terms of what his life was going to be about. He was entranced with the Industrial Revolution and all the different components of that. He kind of fell in love with things like, he thought bicycles were really cool. He thought electricity was really cool. In fact, I think he starts working for like an Edison company. He thought the internal combustion engine was amazing. And what's interesting is that, kind of on his own, he begins to dicker with all of this, and he put together that first car in 1896, the little horseless carriage. And it's really, I don't know if you've ever seen it, it's like 4 bicycle tires. It's got a chain drive, so like a bicycle would have, all connected to a internal combustion engine. And, didn't have a steering wheel, it had a rudder. The rudder would be used to turn the tires, but he's kind of putting everything together to create his car. He was a genius, there's no doubt about that. Part of his genius will be the Model T Ford, of course, and other cars he will come up with. He created the state-of-the-art car for that moment, no doubt about that. He was a genius in production, just in an amazing kind of way. When he finally got his factories put together, and they were the most rationalized assembly line system the world had ever seen. So amazing that even like Lenin sent the communists over to check it out. And, no one was doing it better than Henry Ford. When he finally built the Dearborn plant, no, it's the River Rouge plant. It was the largest industrial facility in the entire world. This was done, I think, right about 1920, right at the beginning of the 1920s. And just this amazingly efficient system. What's intriguing to me is it's an assembly line system that was super rationalized, but none of it was automated at all. And you had like 3 different floors, or I think 2 or 3 floors, and on one floor would be the chassis, and one floor above that would be the body, and they would just be placed on these rails, wooden rails that were greased, so you could just shove them from one position to another. And then at some point, of course, you've got your chassis assembled, and the body would drop down on top of that. They'd screw that all together, move on a little farther, then the engine would come from a couple stories up where it was being assembled, drop down to the whole thing. And then the final thing you would do, and none of it's automated, the workers would simply give the car a shove, and there was a ramp, and the car would roll itself basically out into the parking lot where people could manage and deal with it out there. But it's a genius in terms of the production technology. It's just amazing production line that he would put together. To some degree, he was a genius in terms of labor relations. He created such a rationalized system that he drove the workers crazy, because everyone had like a little teeny task, but they had to do that task again and again and again. You can see they filmed this stuff, because they wanted to kind of study all this stuff. But there's this one guy that was filmed, I just saw this little clip of it, but his job was to take 1/2 of the wooden wheel that would be part of the wheel of the Model T, and he was to put 3 wooden spokes in it, boom, or, I can't remember, 3 or 4, bam, 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 and that's all he did all day long. Pick it up, bam, 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 pick it up, bam, bam, and after a while, you can imagine how that would become mind-numbing, kind of problematic. And so one of the problems was it was so hyper-rationalized that drove the workers a little crazy, because the endless redundancy of their activities. And so one of the things that Ford decided to do was to just make it, just pay them so much that they'd want to stick with it no matter what. So unilaterally, I think this is around 1922, he rose the wages of his workers to $5 a day. Now, you and I know that doesn't sound very good in our moment, but most workers are making more like $1 a day, or somewhere between $1 and $2 a day. So when all of a sudden there was a $5 a day offered, I mean, there are pictures of the plant. It's surrounded by a sea of humanity of all these people who want to get a job there. And in part it was to keep his workers, and in part though, and this is benign also, he wanted his workers to be able to buy his product. He wanted them to have enough money to buy a Model T. It was to be the car for every person. So, there is a kind of a genius in terms of the labor relations dynamics that he will create for himself. But there was also the madness side of Henry Ford. I have to tell you these parts. Once he created the Model T, he simply believed that he had created the car to end all cars. And you guys all know that technology does not work that way, right? It keeps advancing itself. And he stuck with the Model T way too long. He stuck with it all the way until 1926, until almost, causing significant damage to the company, when he finally consented to change it, to change it up basically. And by the way, during that time, he would lose all of these guys who worked for him because, they could see the future a little better than he could see. And so we have William Durant, who goes on to create the General Motors Corporation. We've got the Dodge brothers, of course, who go to create their eponymous company, Chrysler, but also Dodge. Those guys all work for Henry Ford, but they're going to go somewhere else, of course, because they think they can do it better. They've got some better ideas. But so Ford would stick. It's a really bad idea to think that you had created the end all in terms of technology is always going to be a bad idea. But there was more than that. His relationship to his son was Edsel Ford. And I guess you could say that Ford was a believer in tough love, and Edsel Ford will kind of suffer the dynamics of tough love in no uncertain terms. Edsel Ford was not a rich kid, so you can't picture it. I mean, by the time he was in his 20s before his dad starts to really make it. So he had grown up, just as your basic hardworking middle-class guy. And he became part of the Ford company and was great. I mean, he had some really good ideas, but it seems like every time he would come forward with an idea, his father would just literally crush it. In fact, one prototype that Edsel created was crushed by Henry Ford right in front of his son, just to kind of say, you don't get to do this. This is my company, my car. I'm the one who's going to shape this kind of stuff. Now, there are those who would say that Henry Ford murdered or killed his son. That's a little too far to say, but here, what happened was Henry Ford demanded that everyone in his family drink unpasteurized milk. And apparently this led to Edsel getting botulism, which led to his untimely death. I think he was in his 40s or something like that. So anyway, just the situation with Edsel, of course, is really problematic. Later generations of the Ford family will try to honor him with a car in the 1950s named the Edsel. And that didn't quite work out so well. The Edsels become more just a kind of interesting trivial issue or an oddity as far as automobile manufacturing. It's an interesting looking car ahead of its time and really didn't connect with the larger public at that particular time. Anyway, so these are reflections of kind of the problem. Over time, Ford became increasingly detrimental to the well-being of the company. Once he turned to the Model T, he stuck with that too long. And by the 1940s, there's almost a danger that he's going to run his company into the ground. And he finally had to be removed from his position as the chairman of the board. And he was removed by his wife and his daughter-in-law, the wife of Edsel, because they realized that he couldn't manage it anymore. He became increasingly paranoid over the course of his life. He kept personal files on his workers, not personnel, but personal, like what are they doing in their personal lives, that kind of stuff. He had these thugs that he hired to be kind of his enforcers, and they're wandering around the front office, these big guys, they're physical guys, and everyone kind of knew that their job was basically to scare the crap out of people. He became increasingly anti-Semitic in time and increasingly an admirer of Adolf Hitler. And you guys all know that these are all not good things as far as we're concerned. So Henry Ford is a tremendously interesting person, of course, but in this particular moment, we're most interested in just the impact that he's going to have in the car. I can see that I am now running myself out of my space on the card, so I'm going to have to stop. I'll be back as soon as I can, okay?